Thank you, Brittany. I thank you for taking me down a trip down memory lane. Now you all know how old I am. But thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Sid. Thank you for Kim Walker for asking me to share my knowledge of plan giving. And I hope that I can drill it down. My goal today is to make it something that is not over technical, but will give you some talking points with your donors and give you the ability to hopefully build a bigger and better plan giving program with your respective organizations. With that, I will go ahead and get started and try to share my screen unless anyone has any questions thus far. While we're doing this, Brittany is going to be womaning, is that an appropriate word instead of manning? the chat room. So if you have questions, please feel free to interrupt and ask questions during the presentation. Okay, I'm trying to. Can you guys see this now? Okay. So during the presentation, if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat function, and Brittany will interrupt me and ask the question, because this will be a whole lot more rewarding for you if it's interactive as opposed to sitting here and listening to my speech drone on for an hour. So with that, we'll get started, and basically I'm trying to make this the easy plan giving tutorial. So there is a myth that you have to be a technical genius to be able to talk about plan giving, and you have to have an expert in your program. And hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll walk away feeling that that's not true, and you'll feel comfortable talking at least about the very simple types of plan gifts. So our objectives is, number one, to dispel the myth that we just talked about, and to implement the KISS principle, which is keep it simple, stupid. Understand the donor's perspective with regard to estate planning, especially during this time of COVID. Many of you may say, I don't think that it's appropriate to call someone and talk to them about plan giving or talk to them about estate planning during this COVID pandemic, because as you all know, if you watch the news, there are many elderly people who are passing away. And then last but not least is the objective of helping you close plan gifts without specific technical expertise.
Alesia, I'm going to interrupt for just a quick second. We can see the PowerPoint screen, but we don't see like the presentation screen. So you may have, if you have two screens, you may on one screen have it scrolling.
Okay. Okay. Let me grab that. Is that better?
We can see, if you want to go to the top.
My screen sharing is paused. Okay, let me. Okay, how about, hold on just a second. That better?
There we go. Perfect. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay, let me go back to where I was. Okay, everybody can see that now? Okay, so let's take a look at the plan giving terrain. 25% of all gifts from individuals comes from plan gifts. And we expect that to increase in the coming years, especially in light of the COVID pandemic. I will say that one of the silver linings in this pandemic and what everybody is living through, and it took a while to kick in, but I think it has forced many people who have been procrastinators and have put off their estate planning. It's forced many people to come to grips with their eventual mortality and made them go and meet with their attorneys and their investment advisors and to start getting their affairs in order. So from that perspective, there is a silver lining, albeit a small one, in this overall pandemic. In general, 80 to 90% of all plan gifts tend to be wills. Now, many people think that will discussions are very easy discussions, but I beg to differ. Sometimes I think they can be some of the most complicated. So with that, let's just progress on and look at the giving pyramid. So basically, when you're building a fundraising program, you usually start with annual giving. Your donors that give annual gifts help build the foundation and the base. They then bubble up to the major gifts, prospects, and donors, and then you hope at the top of the pyramid we end up getting the ultimate gift, which is their plan gift. What is one thing that plan gifts or people use plan gifts for, in addition to just support the organization? Many people, when they make a planned gift, they've been giving to your organization on a regular basis. And so they want to make sure that that annual gift that they've been giving to your organization is perpetuated after their death. And so many people who are giving a planned gift tend to think of it as it's ensuring that that annual gift that I used to make to my various charities will continue after I pass. So what is your job in the planned giving conversation? What is required of you? I think when you're working with your younger donors, it's different than when you're working with your senior donors. And unfortunately, when I started in this profession, I was a younger donor. And unfortunately, now I've become one of those senior donors, so I can relate even more. I think the first thing is patience. If you try to rush your plan giving donors, you will fail. And when I go out and visit they have a visit with a plan giving donor, I allow at least 2 hours with that donor. Now, many of you are wearing a lot of different hats, and you may not have the capability to spend 2 hours. But if you rush them, they have a new willing victim when you show up on a face-to-face visit with them. They haven't told you their story, and so they want to tell you their stories. And the best thing that you can do, even if you've heard their stories on the telephone and you're meeting with them in person, listen to them as if you've heard them for the first time. So patience is very important. The other thing is empathy. You want to put yourself in their shoes and see where they're coming from. Sensitivity. When you say sensitivity, what should you be sensitive to when you're working with an older population? Any ideas? Come on, guys. This will be so much more fun if you participate.
I'm gonna throw one out there. Maybe age. Is that one?
But what related to age, what do you need to be sensitive about?
That they may be closer to the end of their life than you are. Or good. Thank you guys for popping into the chat. They're facing the end of life, medical conditions, their health, whatever they may be sharing about.
Their family situation.
Religion,
so if you're going,
mental state.
Yep. Whether they're cognitively 100% there. I think you need to be sensitive if you're sending them a letter. Would you use a 8 font or would you use a 14 font? You'll get a whole lot better response if you use 14 font because I'll actually be able to read it. The other thing, if you look at my screen, it was done by one of my wonderful assistants. She made it look pretty. It looks so much better than it did yesterday, but it contradicts what I'm going to say because it's white lettering on a dark background. The worst thing for seniors to be able to read. It's much better if you look over at where it says the plan giving conversation. They're going to be able to read that much better than the white letters on a dark background. The other thing is many people have a hard time hearing, whether they have hearing aids or they are like my dad and they need hearing aids, but they refuse to wear them. So if you're going to choose a restaurant to meet a plan giving donor, then think about the noise level. If you choose a restaurant that has, concrete walls and concrete floors and concrete walls, it's probably going to be very hard for that person to understand you. So you want to be sensitive to all of those types of things. good listening skills, I think, it's not just plain giving. I think if you're in this role and you're raising money, that goes across the board. And understanding your role in the process. You can get these people become like your grandparents or your parents, and you can become very attached to them, which is a good thing, but sometimes there's a very fine line. Sometimes they will ask you to do things that you don't feel comfortable doing. And sometimes they'll ask you to do things that go over the line of ethics or go over the lines of what your job is. So it's always important to keep at the base of your thoughts what your role in the process is. And your role in the process is to help them achieve their philanthropic goals over time through charitable estate planning. Be comfortable with uncertainty, because they may change their mind 3 times before they come to an ultimate decision. And then finally is time. Plain gifts, you don't meet with them once and they give you a copy of their will or they set up a gift annuity. It's a long-term process. And of course, depending on their age, you can't wait too long, but you have to wait a certain amount of time and get really good at gently nudging them is how I refer to it, is give them time to meet with their advisors, give them time to make their decisions, and just start planting this. I've related to growing up on a farm where you plant the seeds and then you occasionally come back and throw some water on it, and then you wait for it to start blooming a little bit and you come back and throw more water on it and some fertilizer, and ultimately you do that. It doesn't always work that way. Recently, I had someone call me and they were interested in knowing what they could do for the vet school, and they ended up giving us $1 million gift and a future chair for the vet school, and it probably took 3 weeks. But they said it was the easiest decision that they've ever made, and it's probably the easiest $1 million gift I've ever received. But that's usually not the norm. Okay, so when you look at plain giving, what are the target markets? The population is aging, and in fact, statistics say that every day an estimated 10,000 Americans will turn 65, and those numbers are expected to double in the next several decades. So we're really starting to see the baby boomers reaching the retirement age. But even past the baby boomers, research has shown that generations beyond us have demonstrated that they also are concerned about philanthropy and are going to be engaged in this tremendous wealth transfer that's currently occurring. And through that, I think, and because more and more charities are out there talking about charitable estate planning options and plain giving opportunities, donors are becoming more and more aware because they're getting those messages from a variety of different types of organizations. Any questions thus far? Okay, moving right along, I would say the first rule is don't judge a book by the cover. 90% of plain giving donors are people with moderate means and non-taxable estates. So to think that plain gifts only come from the super wealthy, don't think that. Think more back to what I originally said, which was many donors look at this plain gift as a way to perpetuate their annual giving. Many are not major donor prospects, but they are loyal and they give repeatedly. When I worked for the American Heart Association, we didn't have alumni, but we had people that survived heart attacks and we had people who survived strokes. But they don't sign up for a heart attack survivor alumni group. And so the way we were able to measure is we looked at people who had routinely given, and many people had given 50 gifts. Now, maybe they were 50 gifts of $1 or $5 or $25, but they ended up being our loyal donors, and that's where we focused our plain giving efforts. Loyal donors in most organizations make up between 20 and 25% of your overall database. So if you add the loyal donors and the repetitive gifts, if you're putting together a marketing or you want to give marketing messages to your plan giving audience, what I would suggest is that you look at your database and first sort by age. Now, this might be a problem because, for example, at the Heart Association, sometimes we had ages and sometimes we didn't. So hopefully your organization captures age on your database. How many of you do capture? How many of you organizations that are, those of you who are not affiliated with Auburn University, how many of you do capture ages on your database? I can't see the.
I see Laura Ann said no. It looks like most people do not. Most people do not.
So if that's something that if you're going to pay for a data overlay, and there are many companies that do that, and you're interested in cultivating more plan giving donors, that's one of the things that you need to make as a part of your database because it can give you a whole lot of information. For example, when tax rules changed, we recently had required minimum distributions for IRAs. The date that someone has to start taking those required minimum distributions changed from 70 and a half to 72. Well, if I know all of my donors who are about to turn 70 and a half, like ones that are 69, I could pull all of those donors and do a quick email to them to alert them, hey, you don't have to start taking your required minimum distributions now until you're 72. Well, they may not hear that anywhere else. If they hear it from me, I think that says volumes for them looking to us as a possible resource and as a possible place to make their donations. Once you sort your database by age, and if you have a smaller database, start asking your people, start asking them to provide their age or preferably their birthday. Then you look at the number of gifts, whether you have, a large number of repeat donors ends up being 5 in your organization, or it may be 25. So here at Auburn, we have over 350,000 donors in our names in our database. If we're getting ready to do a marketing initiative in the Office of Gift Planning, one of the things that we'll do is we'll sort first by age. And we have limited dollars, believe it or not, when we go to do our marketing. And so if our marketing will allow us to do the entire number that we come up with when we say, give me everybody who's 65 years old and older and everybody who's given us 25 gifts, if that number is really large and our marketing dollars are much smaller, then we may go up and say, okay, let's bump the age up to 70 and let's bump the number of gifts up to a higher number. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you can scale up your age and scale up the number of gifts if your marketing dollars will not support the entire database when you do that search. On average, 91% of plan giving donors exhibit loyal patterns of giving to the organization. Now, that's not 100%. And sometimes in some organizations, it may be even smaller. I can't tell you the number of times that we've received very significant plan gifts from somebody who's never supported the organization in the past at all. Or if they have, they gave $5 or $10 or $25, and it was 20 years ago. So don't let that completely drive your whole marketing plan. After you've done the search and sort, you basically need to look at who is the cream of the crop and devise a donor-specific message for them that is, instead of a form letter, it has their name, and it hopefully incorporates something that's individual to them. And do special invites, in-person visits, and individualized letters for those people, and then market to the remainder according to your annual marketing plan. So how many of you actually have an annual marketing plan for your organization?
While everyone is, oh, it looks like United Way in the Chattahoochee Valley has one. We covered in Lee County Literacy Coalition, we covered annual giving earlier this summer as well. So I think it's definitely been a topic we've been talking about.
So in that marketing plan, how many of you include a plain giving message as part of the marketing plan? You're muted.
I was going to assume that United Way and Chattahoochee Valley did, and Chandra says they're starting this fall. Tracy says that they do as well.
Okay, so it sounds like most people on the call don't have a specific plain giving marketing budget. So what I would encourage, and there are lots of ways to slip plain giving into your marketing without it costing you a tremendous amount of money. And one thing, and I don't even think I have it up here, is the first and most important thing is every piece of literature and every letter that you send out, every opportunity, even at the bottom of your web page, everywhere that you can put it, you should put, have you include XYZ organization in your will or estate plan? And then basically follow that up as if you have, please let us know. We would like the opportunity to thank you, and we would like the opportunity to be able to fully understand what your philanthropic goals and vision and wishes are, so that when the time comes, we are better able to fulfill those. Now, you can't put all of that on the bottom of the letter, but if you simply put, and I can't tell you how many leads we generated from the American Heart Association when we put on everything, have you included AHA in your will? And so people will let you know that. So if you don't have the budget for a dedicated plain giving marketing plan, then choose one part or choose one message that you're going to send in your annual marketing plan to be a focus on plain giving. And probably wills is the easiest of that. And so of your overall annual marketing plan, whether you do one message, you do two messages, or you do four messages, make it consistent across all the things that you're doing, all the things that you're marketing. So let me give you an example. So here at Auburn, I came back to Auburn. This is my second stint at Auburn. I came back 5 years ago. I went and met with every single school and college within the university and said, we would like to do an annual marketing plan. And in that, we would like to have 4 messages per year that focus on plain giving. And for example, in the fall, we would like to focus on charitable gift annuities. And do we have your support to only market that message in the fall? And then at the end of the year, we had another plain giving marketing message. And the whole idea was across the entire organization, you have the same message being delivered. So that you don't have the College of Pharmacy talking about gift annuities in the fall, and then the College of Engineering talking about wills in the fall. So, and think about it from the perspective of many donors at Auburn are married, and they may get a magazine from pharmacy, and they may get a magazine from engineering. So if they open that magazine in the fall, they're both going to see the same message. One's just for one school, and the other one's for the other college. So keep that in mind. I would recommend planning it out at the beginning of the fiscal year, so then it's easy to drop it in. We try to do a quarter-page ad, a half-page, and a full-page ad, and then we can distribute those out to the different colleges or schools so that it's easy for them to just drop it in. Whatever you're promoting in print, email, postcard, or any of those things, follow that same message up with your website, your Facebook, any social media. Again, keep it as simple as possible, and I would encourage you to use donor stories, because donor stories are less technical, and it makes people think, oh, I see that Jane did this. Now I feel like that I could do the same thing. For year-end QCD, and we're going to talk about QCD in a minute, works very well. Make it easy for donors to mature eyes to read. Response cards and buck slips. Does everybody know what buck slips and response cards are, especially buck slips? I suspect United Way will know what those are, and probably Boys and Girls Club too.
So far, not much, no.
Okay, so buck slips are things like when you get an outright gift for a donor, so you get $100 or $1,000 from a donor, and you send them their confirmation for that gift. If you can slip in a piece of paper that's the same size as the envelope, and if you're not doing mailed responses anymore, just let me know, and I won't talk about that. But it's basically just the size of an envelope that you're sending the thank you letter in, and you just put something in there that says, have you included our organization in your will? If you have, please let us know. There's a checkbox. Yes, I'm considering, or yes, I have included. And then give them the opportunity to provide their name and phone number and their age, because then you can add that to your database and start to build that. And you'd be surprised how many of those. And that will give you lead generation for your plan giving initiatives. So what motivates people to make a charitable estate gift? Many people think it's taxes, and that's not true. Most people have a desire to support the charity and the mission of the charity, so 97% would say that. 35% do say it's a desire to reduce taxes. And we're going to talk about that's not so much prevalent anymore, because the estate taxes, at least, the exemption is so high that most people don't have an estate tax problem. Long range estate and financial planning issues accounts for 35, and so on and so forth. So talking about the estate tax, there is a disappearing estate tax. Back when my grandfather died in probably the 90s, the most that you could leave to an individual was $600,000. So he had a taxable estate. Now, the amount that you can leave, an individual can leave to whomever they wish, is 11.58. So if I have $11.58 million in my bank account today, and I pass away, I can leave that to whomever I want, and there's not a dime that will have to be paid for estate tax. And then if I'm married, the maximum amount is 23.16. So as you can imagine, most people don't have a taxable estate, so most people are not worried about estate taxes anymore. However, this reverts back to $5 million in 2025. So it will be here before we know it, and who knows what our legislators will or will not do, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. It's really, really been a challenging time and frustrating time for those of us who like to do estate planning, because estate planners typically are long-term planners, and when the tax laws change every other year, it's really, really difficult to be engaged in long-term planning. So I have no idea, but right now it's set to revert back to $5 million. And then when it reverts back to $5 million, you may have to see more interest in people making plan gifts. So when we talk about asking for a plan gift, a lot of people feel uncomfortable with that. How many of you feel, just give a quick yes or no, if you feel uncomfortable, how to broach the subject of a plan gift, because it involves death and your mortality and all those other things that some people feel very uncomfortable talking about.
We have a no. Patricia doesn't feel uncomfortable talking about. I know I would personally. That would be a very difficult thing for me to breach.
Well, let me just put everybody at ease, because most of the time, you start talking to them about what their legacy is going to be. How do they want to be remembered? Avoid the technical And one of the things that I have used throughout my career, and I don't know what it is, and maybe there's been some scientific research on it, but instead of just asking, have you included us in your will? I always ask, do you mind if I ask, have you included us in your will? And for some reason, if I ask, do you mind if I ask, it goes over so much more smoothly than if I just say, hey, have you considered Mr. and Mrs. Jones? Have you considered leaving us in your will? So ask permission to ask, and you may find out that that goes a little smoother. And I would suggest starting with the bequest because most people should have one. And if they don't have one, they know that they should have one. And one of the things I like to tell people is when I started in the CFP program, I went to a training session. It was taught by an attorney. And she said, trust me, if you have an estate and it only has one chair, there will be 3 people that want that one chair. So you really do need to have a will and an estate plan, no matter what your age. So if you seek to discover what bequest expectancies are out there, if you have those conversations and you talk to the donor about the difference that they are going to make with their bequest, it's very possible that they'll increase the amount. Let me back up a slide. One of the things, how many of you are familiar with Dr. Russell James? Okay, Dr. Russell James you go on YouTube and just type in Plain Giving and Dr. Russell James. This is a guy who obviously was bored in his job and had nothing better to do. So, been in Plain Giving for a long time. He's like, let's put some Plain Giving donors in an MRI machine and look at their brain waves and what gets excited and what portions and what regions of their brain get excited when we talk about ways to make a plain gift versus we talk about what difference their plain gift is going to make when the gift ultimately comes to the organization. And guess which regions, guess which parts of their brain, I don't know, let me rephrase that. Guess when their brain started to light up the most? It was when they talked about the difference that their gift is going to make, not that they were making for a bequest or a charity bequest or a charity gifting. So that's the importance of talking about what difference it's going to make. Us plain giving people always tend to focus on the technical and how are we going to do it, and then get them excited at the end about the difference it's going to make. And we always need to be cognizant of making that the reverse. The other thing is bequest donors can always change their mind. So this is a long-term commitment from you. You have to continue to steward that gift and make sure that they are still connected to your organization. In talking to them about bequest, you can also uncover problem property. Now, what do you think I mean when I say problem property?
I don't see anything in the chat, but I have no idea.
Okay, so somebody wants to give you a piece of farm property, and that farm property had a great big diesel tank stored on it, and so that's what we would call a problem property. Or they want to give you here's a classic. When I was at the Heart Association, we had tons of people that would call us because back then Florida had tons of these developments that were going to happen, and so they would go out and subdivide a piece of the land, and donors many of them from up north, would go in and buy a lot in that subdivision, and the subdivision never really made it, and so they wake up one day and they paid taxes on this property for 30 years, and they're like, why am I still doing this? Let's give it to the Heart Association. Well, the Heart Association, even though it's a nonprofit organization, would still have to pay the property taxes on it. And it's not use related to what the Heart Association does. And so that's not a property that, and it's not sellable because otherwise the donor would have sold it. And so that would be another example of problem property. And so if people are talking to you, it's better to know that up front if there are issues with what they're trying to give you, so that they can make alternate solutions for their estate. Bequest language is very, very important. We have this already written out, so if an attorney calls us, if a donor calls us, and they're doing their estate plan, we have something that we can give to them, and it's basically, it outlines our, and I don't think that's our tax ID number, it's somebody else's tax ID number, so don't think that that's the Auburn tax ID. I just made something up. So it's important to have that ready in a nicely presented way to be able to share with your donors or with their attorneys. So if an attorney calls you and wants to know the language, don't just give them the language. Tell them it's really important for you to know who the donor is. Now, don't think that the attorney's going to tell you because they have confidentiality and privacy rules. But you can encourage the attorney to get the donor to let you know that they made a gift for your organization. Number one, because you'd like to be able to thank them and let them know how important it is and what a difference this gift is going to make. But more importantly, I tell our donors, it's important for us to know because we need to build the roadmap now that outlines how you want this gift to be used, so that, because you're not going to be here to explain the roadmap, and more than likely, I'm not going to be here to explain the roadmap either. So we need to leave a roadmap for those people who come behind us, so that there's no question whatsoever of how the money should be spent. And if it's unrestricted, and the organization can spend it any way they want to, probably not as big of a deal. But if it's going into an endowment, or if it's going to support a particular program or project, if it's a program or project, take a look at your programs and projects and see how long have they been there at your organization, and look at the age of the donor. And if the donor's 50, that donor is probably not going to pass away, or that gift is not going to come to your organization for maybe 30 years. And so ask yourself and encourage them to write into their estate designation something that allows you to be able to actually put it to use 30 years from now. And so for those organizations that have a lot of changing types of priorities and programs, you might want to encourage them to make unrestricted gifts. Any questions on that? When you're included in the will, you become a part of the family. So I just encourage you to act like it and stay in touch regularly. The new Peter principle is not everything goes wrong, but I have a donor in Florida who has no affiliation to Auburn at all, but he likes to set up charitable gift annuities. And he's done them with Emory, with various medical institutions, and he and his sister both set up gift annuities with us. And so I stay in touch with him. When the hurricane a couple of years ago, the really big hurricane was headed towards Florida, I called him and I said, and he was in his mid-80s. I said, Peter, I know you're there alone. I said, and I know you have the dog, so you probably have limited choices to go to evacuate. I said, I know Auburn's a long ways, but if you would like to come to Auburn, I have plenty of room at my house. Yada, yada, yada. The next time I called him, he said, I want to tell you something. He said, I have included your institution in my estate plans, and the reason I did it is, of all the organizations that I've supported, you were the only one who called to check on me and called to offer me an alternative. When I called him, I didn't think that he would give him his car and drive to my house. It would have been fine if he had. But, some of these people are leaving. We are their family because they don't have anybody else. This gentleman, his wife died. They never had children. His sister is alive in Florida. She's significantly well off and has no children either. So just think about those things when there are people that have needs, and the more you can make them feel like they're special. And I'm not doing I'm not making them feel special because I want him to make us. I want him to include us in his will. I made that call because I care about him as an individual, and he cares about our organization. So therefore, I care about him. Recognition is important for some people.
Real quick, if that's okay. On the last slide, I have a question real quick on stewarding. Hope asks, for stewarding planned guests, how frequently do you contact or visit?
I think it depends on the person. So, for example, Peter, especially during the pandemic, he's now 91 years old, and don't get me wrong, he's completely of sound mind. He works in his wood shop and builds furniture every day. I try to call him at least a couple of times a month, but I have other donors we may call. We actually have a stewardship program, and our goal, and I can assure you, we are not reaching our goal. It's something we aspire to do, is to at least touch and have a conversation and a face-to-face visit with every one of our Plan Giving donors at least once every couple of years. And that's difficult to do. We have 3 people right now in the Office of Gift Planning. We have to raise money, and so we have to partner with the schools and colleges to make sure that this is getting done. And unfortunately, it's not the overall overreaching priority right now, but we're trying to refocus on that and bring some components in as far as expectations and setting those up so that stewarding Plan Giving donors is a priority. It's never going to be equal probably to raising and seeing new donors, but it needs to be there because donors can change their mind. And if you're not going to visit with them, I can assure you the other people that they have in their that they've listed, they will be visiting with them. So we call them on that. We have we have student help. So you can have volunteers help you if you don't have students in your organization, and call them on their birthday. Again, you got to have their birthday to be able to do that. But if it's a donor that has nobody in their family and they've left their entire state to various charities, they may go through their birthday and nobody even calls them all day long. Hopefully their friends do, but that's one of the things that we do for stewardship. But we try to get in front of them at least once every couple of years.
That was a perfect answer. And this, I have another question, and it's a little bit on this and perhaps a slide before. Laura Ann says, you've mentioned gift annuities, wills, etc. As someone new in this arena, where do we learn about these different options and avenues for making planned gifts?
Okay, at the end of the slideshow, I have a slide that's resources. And I would encourage you, number one, to go to YouTube and look at the Russell James videos, because they break Plan Giving down fairly easily. And watch those and read and sign up for the National Plan Giving Institution and read.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
But the videos, the Russell James videos, I think will be very helpful. Okay, so I'm out of time, aren't I? Beneficiary.
I was going to say, for those of you who have to go, feel free to go, and we want to respect Alesia's time. So whenever you need to wrap up, it's good. But for those of you who want to stay, we can go ahead and continue on.
And we can send this presentation out for those who have to leave too. So one of the very easiest plan gifts that you can do, and it's very popular right now, is simply ask your donors to make your organization the beneficiary of various accounts. So pods and tods, they're just payable on death and transfer on death. Payable on death is your bank account. Transfer on death is your investment accounts. And it's easy to collect on these because it transfers outside of the estate. Basically, you need a death certificate to be able to go and say to the bank, Mr. Jones left us as a beneficiary of his savings account here at Bank of America. Here's the death certificate. Will you please send us our check? Retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, all of those. With the high current estate tax exemption equivalent, most people are only worried about income tax now. So if your donor has to give you, is going to include you in their estate plan, one of the best things you can do is say, have you considered making us the beneficiary of your retirement accounts? Because if you leave those to heirs, your heirs are going to have to pay taxes on it because nobody's ever paid taxes on that. Now, I'm talking retirement accounts that are tax deferred, not Roth accounts. Leave the Roth accounts to somebody else, but the accounts that you have that are retirement accounts that your heirs will have to pay taxes on, leave those to charity because charity can get the full amount and don't have to pay taxes, and it's an easy gift to the charity. Retirement plans and RMD are people familiar with these? If you have a retirement plan, when you turn 72, it used to be 70 and a half, but when you turn 72, you have to start taking you have to start taking distributions from that. Why would the IRS want you to, or the government want you to start taking distributions from your retirement plan?
I'm going to assume so that you can pay taxes on them.
Yes, said the woman whose husband is an accountant. Absolutely, they want you to pay taxes. You've gone from the time you were 30 years old to the time you're 72, and you've never paid taxes on that money, and they want to start collecting taxes. And so that is called RMD, or required minimum distribution. The CARES Act this year said that if you are of the age that you have to take required minimum distribution, you're exempt for 2020 because of COVID. But your donors have another option. They can do a qualified charitable distribution. So if they take money out of their IRA today, they have to pay taxes on it. Well, if you take that money, it runs the possibility of putting you up into an additional a higher tax bracket. And most people don't want to be in a higher tax bracket. And so they can take that money out of their IRA, directly have the IRA administrator send it to your charity, and they can do that with up to $100,000 a year. When we first started promoting this, we called them charitable IRA rollovers. If you are doing that in your organization, stop. Do not call it a charitable IRA rollover. And here's why. When you go to the plan administrator and you ask them, or you're trying to explain to the donor, you as the charity can't transfer their money, but the donor has to go to their plan administrator, like Fidelity or Vanguard, and they have to request that money be sent. If they go and they tell them that they want to do a charitable IRA rollover, there is no telling what they may get, because they don't call it that. They call it a QCD. So we totally eliminated calling these things charitable IRA rollovers. Okay. Yes?
We're good. I needed to mute something. Tara, if you needed to say something, go ahead and unmute yourself, but it sounded like it was an accidental unmute. So I think we're good.
Okay. So, and this is a way that, is this a planned gift? Is it not? It depends on who you ask. But this is a very easy way for your charity to start to get income now. And it's a tax efficient way for donors to get that. So if you have donors that you think are over the age of 72, or if they were already factored in at the 70 and a half, if they turned 70 and a half before the end of 2019, then 70 and a half they still have to take their R&D. If they did not turn 70 and a half before the end of 2019, they don't have to take it until they're 72. But this is a great way for you to get income immediate from your donors, and it's a great thing to do towards the end of the year, because at the end of the year, a lot of donors keep their money invested until the last possible minute, and then they have to make their distribution in December. So if you can put this in front of them at that point in time, it could very much help you. They are not allowed to distribute the distributions out on a QCD to donor advised funds. So if you're competing against donor advised funds, that's not gonna, they can't do this for that purpose. And they cannot give it for seating priority or any type of gift where they're getting a benefit back. I'm not going to go through this. It's really important. I had a donor who did a QCD, and then I met with her, and she said, my accountant said that I didn't, there was no benefit tax-wise from doing that. And if you give a charitable donation, you know on your tax form you enter the charitable donation. It's totally different because you don't get a tax deduction for this type of gift, but what you do is you don't get taxed on that money. However, when the form comes from Fidelity or from Vanguard, it is going to include the total amount. So if you were required to take $20,000 out and you gave the $20,000 to Auburn University in the QCD, the tax form that you get will still come and will still have $20,000 on it. And so it's important to point out to your donors, and this is the form in 2018, this is the form 1040. So, for example, if someone had to take out $30,000 for their required minimum distribution, so they had to take 30, but they gave 25,000 to us. There's no place anywhere that you see on this screen to put $25,000. You put $5,000 because 25 is the amount that you gave to charity. And if you look over in that little tiny box over to the right where I've circled it, 5,000 is the amount that you're going to be taxed on, because even though you were required to take 30, you gave 25 to charity. So in essence, the difference is your $5,000 that you're going to have to pay taxes on it. And the QCD there is letting the IRS know the difference is the amount that you gave to some charity. So I think it's important to let donors know that, because what would be worse than donors giving this money to charity and then not doing their tax forms right, and they're actually giving it to charity but then still paying taxes on it. So I have two different examples of that. And if you want to go back and look at the slides, you're welcome to do that. And then life insurance, if you make the charity the owner and the beneficiary of the policy, then any premiums that you pay are tax deductible for the donor. So, a lot of people have differing, and when I was at Auburn before, I did not deal with life insurance at all. And the people who came before me or came after me before I came back to Auburn really focused on a life insurance program. I don't recommend that you build your plan giving program around any one plan gift, not life insurance, not wills, not charitable remainder trust. But if you manage it the right way and you get them to front load if you try to get them to make large gifts for the policy up front that are tax deductible to them, then the insurance policy is often paid up and you don't have to do a whole lot to that for the rest of their lives. And then on the flip side, it's really easy to collect. Documenting your plan gifts is very important, and you can have a simple form or you can have a more complex form. If this is an example of our form, the reason ours is complex because I don't want to just know if they have a plan gift. I want to know what type of plan gift they have. And the reason being, if you remember me saying before, it's hard for us to plan because they change the tax laws every 2 years. Well, if they change it, I want to know if they've changed it and they've changed the required minimum distribution from 70.5 to 72. And I know that here are the 15 people that have given or planning to give through a QCD, then I can send them an email and say, here's some legislation that's changing on QCD or if I have reported everybody that's made a gift in the past and from a qualified charitable distribution, and I know that in 2020, the CARES Act has eliminated the need for them to mandatory take a required minimum distribution. I can send it out to them. If I don't segment those that way, there's no way that I can keep them in the loop. So if you don't have that capability, think about building it into the future. I think it will help the long-term growth of your plan giving program. Now I want to talk about the flip side of plan giving. You are basically spinning your wheels if you're out there working on trying to secure plan gifts left and right, and you're doing an awesome job. And then when the donor dies, you just wait for a check to be sent from the executor and say, "Oh, you got $100,000. Thank you so much." It requires more effort than that. If you're doing that, I will suggest that you are probably leaving money on the table. So ask for and read if somebody, and the executors will send you a disclaimer and say, before we send you your $100,000, please sign this disclaimer saying that, we fulfilled our responsibilities. Well, if you owe it to the donor to do and fulfill the donor's wishes, and they're not here to help you do that. So you can ask the executor for a copy of the will or a copy of the trust. So if you are entitled to get something, you should be reading the document that explains exactly what you're supposed to get, so that you are fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility back to the deceased donor to collect everything that was due to you. Wills are required to be filed at the courthouse in their public record. So if someone leaves you in their will, you can go to their county courthouse, or you can go to the courthouse online in many counties and request that document. If you're a percentage beneficiary, you need to ask for an inventory, and because otherwise, how do you know that your percentage is being fulfilled? But that's very important. If you're doing one part of the plan giving program and you're not fulfilling the other part, it really does almost end up being that we are spending our wheels. So please have somebody, and if you don't have a tax attorney on retainer at your organization, then build a plan giving advisory committee of people who are experts in the plan giving field, and then ask for them to do pro bono work or to help guide you through that process. The last thing is celebrate your plan giving donors with a recognition society or event. Include everybody. When I came back to Auburn, they had different levels. There was the diamond level and the sapphire and the ruby, and I don't know, and there was revocable and irrevocable. And a lot of plan giving programs you will see, they will treat revocable gifts differently than irrevocable gifts. And to that I say, okay, a will is a revocable gift. So if you have a donor who's left you $1 million in their will, they can change it at any time. And then you have a donor who set up an irrevocable charitable gift annuity for $25,000. Are you really going to put that $25,000 donor above the $1 million donor just because their gift is, they can't take it back? I don't think that's smart. I would lump them all together and treat them all as being special and just eliminate the levels, and it makes it very easy on you. The other thing I would recommend is anytime you're recognizing people or publishing lists of people, include an anonymous donor or two. And if you certainly miss somebody, it gives you a little bit of wiggle. I thank you for your time and attention, and I'll answer any questions. And then if you want to know more about plan giving, there are YouTube videos, not only by Russell, but I think you're entertaining. My go-to person since I started, there's this gentleman named Conrad Pytel, who is a tax attorney, but he put together the complete plan giving manual. And it's not just good for plan giving. It talks about valuation, and every type of gift you can imagine. I could not have gone through my career without that book. Plaingiving.com, Crescendo, TG Talk, and then there's plaingiving.com. There's a guy on there that has created the Plain Giving Bible, and I have not seen that, but it looks like it's very similar to the Conrad Pytel Complete Plain Giving. So I'm sorry I took longer than I was supposed to go through, but I will gladly share the slides, and I'm available if somebody wants to talk offline, answer any questions that people may have.
You know, we you only went over because we were late getting in there, and that's that's on me. So don't worry about that at all. In the chat, everyone is just saying thank you so much. This has been incredibly helpful to them, and it's helping me learn a lot. I can't wait to share this with my husband. And show him this, because this is an interest of his as well, as he's learning more about it. So Alesia, thank you so much. I think this is, like Chandra says, perfect timing for all of this information, and we are so grateful to you and your knowledge. And everyone, again, thank you so much for coming and joining us today, and thank you for your patience as we worked out some technical issues. This is the last program in our summer fundraising series, but we do have one. We're wrapping up Greg Depke's 4 Steps of Donor Fundraising, where he's going to cover stewardship. And that is going to be on Wednesday, August 26th at 10 a.m. And we have so many more programs coming into the fall as we ease into the fall, because this is going to be an interesting learning curve for all of us. But again, feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to follow up with an email today so that you have our information. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll pass them along to Alesia or share her email with you. And again, thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. Have a good day.